So characters can make or break your story. Let me prove it to you. Our story follows an orphan from a desert planet who leaves their home, fights this intergalactic evil empire, becomes a space wizard, and ultimately turns the bad guy good right before they die and they become Master Space Wizard. I just described two different stories. One is a classic, the other is not. So why is Luke a compelling character, but Rey is not? We're going to get into the weeds of that today to help you make your stories more compelling by analyzing why one of these characters works really well and became an instant classic and the other just doesn't. So what is the problem? Why is Luke interesting and compelling and has become this epitome of a classic hero, and Rey? You can have the best idea for a story possible, but without proper execution of the characters, it's going to fall flat. Rey is a perfect example of this. The original trilogy and the new trilogy of Star Wars are pretty much copy and pasted. One of these stories works really, really well, and the other story does not work well. So why is Luke Skywalker compelling and Rey isn't? Well, the big thing between these two characters, and a big gripe that I've heard spoken about Rey, is she just has force powers. Luke works really hard in order to get stronger. He is a farm boy. He's nothing special at the beginning of the movie. And it takes him until the end of the first film to actually begin stepping into the power that he has, where Rey just tries it. And on the first time, she gets it right. Why is that not interesting, but this is compelling? Well, the first thing is struggle. Luke struggles all throughout his story. He struggles to get stronger. He struggles to keep his friends safe. He struggles with right versus wrong. He struggles with the light side of the Force versus the dark side of the Force. Rey gets captured and goes, I heard that people can use force powers. I think I'm force sensitive. Let me try something. And she perfectly executes something that takes Jedi a long time canonically to do. You can't just suddenly control someone's mind or mind trick them. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of training, and Rey can just do that. Another struggle that Luke has is he's not a good duelist. He doesn't end up fighting Vader until episode 5, and there's good reason for this. It's because he doesn't stand a chance. Frankly, he didn't really stand a chance against him in episode 5 either, but Rey picks up lightsaber and suddenly can beat down the bad guy who's been trained his whole life in the ways of the Force and in combat. Struggle. We relate to characters struggling. If things come way too easily to your character, either they need to be a master of what they're doing already, and that way we're watching a competent, iconic character. Like watching any of the Mission Impossible movies is fun. Watching Indiana Jones is fun. Why? Because they're competent and they know what they're doing and they're good at it. But when you take someone who's supposed to be a beginner, who's brand new, and suddenly make them really competent, you lose your audience because we're not watching their growth. You promised a growth arc from someone who doesn't know what they're doing to someone who does know what they're doing, and you don't deliver on that. You go from infant to master. That doesn't work. That's not how life works. That doesn't make it for a compelling story. So to make sure that your characters stay compelling, give them struggles and give them growth. Even if you have a character who's really, really competent in something, but you want them to have a major growth arc, they need to have a struggle somewhere. Maybe they're a competent warrior and fighter, but they can't work with a team and now they have to. You're still following those infancy to master. steps in a slow progression. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the character arcs of these two characters. As I said, Luke struggles to learn and to grow throughout his story. His goal, his desire in the first movie is to be helpful. He helps his aunt and his uncle. He then ends up helping Ben. He then ends up helping the rebellion by recruiting Han to be the hero. He helps rescue Leia because it's the right thing to do. But in the first movie, he doesn't have this strong sense of, I am the hero. I'm the one who can solve this problem. When he joins the rebellion, he doesn't try to be a prominent player. He helps wherever he can. He's there to assist, but ultimately he becomes a hero. And that growth, that desire of just wanting to help people, mirrors really well the need he has to actually step up into this leadership role. Rey, what is her want? What is her desire? She desires to get off planet, and then she does on the Falcon, which was such a fun moment to see it on the big screen for the first time for me. But she wants to know her parents, but that doesn't really come up until the next movie, and it's stated, and then they just move on as if it's nothing. So what is it that Rey actually wants? I'm struggling to figure this out. Let me know in the comments below if you can actually pinpoint this. But this is a problem that Rey has, and why Luke is successful is because Luke has a desire, he has a goal, and he has a need. He has someone he needs to become, and you can watch him go through that arc from his want leaning into his need, from wanting to help people to leading them, from wanting to be in the background to being the forerunner and a powerful force. Rey is just there. She's going on this adventure and she's just kind of along for the ride, and suddenly she has powers that she can use, and she gets a lightsaber and she knows how to perfectly wield that, even though she's clearly never had that kind of combat at all before. And what is her goal? What is her desire? What is her want? And then what is her need? Her need is to become the hero, but she just kind of, poof, instantly enters that role. So to make your characters compelling, if you do want to give your characters a growth arc, make sure that their want contrasts with their need. Their want is your character's goal, where they're going after this one specific thing. Luke wants to help others. He helps his aunt and uncle, and then he helps Ben, and then he ends up helping the princess, which is ending up helping the rebellion. And by crossing these thresholds and going through these trials, he realizes, I need to step into a stronger role in order to truly help the rebellion. So his desire to just simply be an assistant to people and to encourage others and to help them go along turns into him stepping into this prominent role. Luke lived his life in the background, and then he realizes he needs to step into prominence, and you see him take those small steps towards that. Rey was in the background, and then, oh, you're special, so you're important, and now you're prominent, and you're the leader. Woo! It's not earned. There's no growth. There's no struggle. Like, she struggles a tiny bit to use the Force, but it's just instantaneous for her. So to give your characters the best opportunity to be compelling, giving them a growth arc, starting them from one point and leading them into another point. Give them a goal that ends up leading them to the person they need to be by the end of the story, whether they achieve that goal or not. Zuko is a great example of a character who achieves his goal and was miserable for achieving his goal. Check out this video up here where I talk more about Zuko. So what else separates these two characters? Why is Luke compelling and Rey is just not? Well, their growth arc trajectory is one of the major factors of this. So Luke, his whole arc is he's growing, he's learning, he's faced with this, oh wait, this big evil is my father. My father was a war hero that fought alongside Ben. That means heroes can fall. And episode 6, so cool. In episode 6, he's wearing black the whole time because they're playing with the you're not sure if he's going to remain with the light side or he's going to turn to the dark side now that he knows that he's not perfect, that he can fall to the dark side like his father did. There's this struggle of will he, won't he? Will he complete his growth arc and become a hero, or will he turn and become tragic like his father did? And then during that last battle sequence in episode 6, you see the flap of his coat falls open and it's been white the whole time underneath. And that's a visual cue that he has always chosen to be good. And it's his belief that anyone can change and anyone can grow and anyone can be redeemed is what caused Vader to be redeemed. Side tangent, Luke in the first trilogy is not Luke in the sequel trilogy. Because what I just described of anyone can be redeemed and there's good in everyone, it just completely dismisses with his nephew. So Luke goes through this whole growth arc of becoming more powerful, and with more power comes the temptation to fall to the dark side. He sees that powerful heroes can fall to the dark side. When Vader says he's his father, that's a really big blow to him because with great power can come great corruption quickly if you don't know how to handle it and if you aren't strong in your morals and strong in your beliefs, it can corrupt very quickly. And he sees this in his father. And he showcases this beautiful redemption. People can be redeemed. He fights in order to give his father the opportunity to be redeemed. It's this beautiful moment that he actually gets to be with Anakin for a few moments. At the end of Anakin's life, he returned to himself. Instead of being Darth Vader, he became Anakin Skywalker again. And it's this beautiful story of redemption. Why? Because he understood how powerful evil can be, but he also understood how powerful good can be. So that is the ultimate hero's journey. Rey, on the other hand, is told that her grandfather is Palpatine. And at the end of her story, she ends up saying, no, I am a Skywalker. Which, first of all, she has no right at all to do that. If anyone had a right to claim themselves as a Skywalker, it's Ahsoka. That's another tangent for another time. But she denounces the truth and chooses something else. When you're looking at character arcs, there's a couple different character arc structures. There's a positive arc, which is what we tend to follow, which is a character starts at one place and they end at a more beneficial place later on. There's a flat character arc, neutral character arc. These characters are characters who don't change, really. They are who they are at the beginning, they are who they are at the end. And because they don't have a growth arc, they cause the world around them to go through a growth arc. Then there's the third type of character arc, which is a negative character arc. This character arc is when a character is growing, and then when they are faced with the truth at the end of their story, they decide to reject it. Typically, this is a villainous character arc, and what feels really weird about Rey is technically she goes through a villainous character arc. She learns the truth of who she is, and she just rejects it as if it never happened. She's like, nope, that didn't happen. I am a Skywalker. I'm not a Palpatine. It just is so jarring because you have a hero going through a negative growth arc, and that's not supposed to work. So her character arc in and of itself is broken from a plotting perspective because negative arcs tend to lead to tragic characters, but she's still a hero at the end and is fine. Just weird, and it's a mess. Rey does not work as a compelling character. And here's the biggest part about all this is I think Rey could have worked as a compelling character. I think episode 7, for its flaws, still set her up to be interesting. It's set up for a story to be better developed. And from what I've seen of what the story was supposed to be, what was cut from the movie, it this whole series could have been much more compelling and the characters more interesting, and we actually relate to them. So when you're writing characters, please keep them compelling, give them growth, give them struggles. Don't just make them perfect. That's why Rey failed where Luke succeeded, is they just gave everything to her way too easily and way too quickly. She didn't struggle, and her biggest struggle was trying to get a grumpy Luke to train her, and honestly, she didn't need it. So that whole her following him around on the island trying to convince him to help felt useless because it didn't feel like she actually needed help from anyone. It didn't feel like she actually needed to grow. It didn't feel like she had to overcome anything. She was just a puppet being pulled on a string, going through these emotional plot points, or what's supposed to be emotional plot points. And it's not, because she doesn't grow, she doesn't change, she doesn't get better. There's no strong arc. There's no strong desire of hers. She desires romance. I can't. If you guys can pinpoint Rey's goals and desires and her growth arc and what lies she believes, please let me know in the comments below, because I've spent a good amount of time trying to rack my brain around this. And I do believe that she could have been a very compelling character. They just didn't execute on it well. So remember, when you're creating compelling characters, make sure that they do have a growth arc, that they start at one point and go to the other. And to make that growth arc compelling and make us really care about them, make sure that they actually struggle, so that when they do claim a victory, when they do showcase their power, when they do become a space wizard, it feels earned and it's satisfying. And understand the difference between different arcs. You can have a negative growth arc and it be a very compelling story. But when you have a negative growth arc, it tends to be a tragedy at the end. So if you're going to use one, make sure that's how it ends. But be careful while you're writing. You can have a great idea. I think the initial idea for Rey was a great idea, but the execution wasn't there. But you can learn from other people's mistakes and from other people's victories and learn how to make your stories compelling, make your characters rich and interesting that your audience will attach to. And for more on Luke Skywalker, check out this video right here.